My victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, oh bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, ever be strong. Still be my vision, oh ruler of all.
Good morning. Welcome to the David Stenbaugh Show. This morning we're going to be looking at 1 Kings chapter 21, verses 1 through 7, and then we're going to jump down and look at verses 16 through 20. It goes without saying that Ahab, in many ways, was a man of unusual ability, and his reign as king, in the estimation of the world, places him among the most successful rulers of the northern kingdom. If he had known and respected God as he should have, the story of his life would have been entirely different. But one cannot excuse the king's misconduct on the grounds that he knew nothing of that which is right in God's sight. For his contact with the prophet Elijah, to say nothing of other influences for good which came into his life, was sufficient to bring to his attention many of the principles of righteousness. For the inspired record plainly says that he sold himself to do that which is evil in the sight of God. That's 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 25. He simply allowed the wrong kind of influences to have sway in his life. Ahab could have done better if he had wanted to, but when his record is examined in its fullness, it will be easy to see that he followed the way of his own choosing. It often happens that a person will allow a particular sin to dominate his life, with the result that his final destiny will depend upon his attitude toward it. Benedict Arnold, for example, permitted the spirit of resentment and revenge to characterize his thinking, and so, being ambitious and quick to take offense, it was easy for him to imagine that he was being mistreated. If Benedict Arnold had curbed that attitude and had honestly sought to overcome it, his record would have been different. But when he allowed that feeling to have free rein, the time came when he went beyond the point of no return. Having been reprimanded by General Washington, he did not check his desire for revenge before attempting to betray his country into the hands of the enemy. And if one will read the gospel narratives, he will not have any difficulty in seeing that was precisely the course which was followed by Judas Iscariot in betraying Jesus. 1. He allowed avarice and the spirit of revenge to remain in his heart. 2. He was rebuked by Jesus. And 3. He sought an opportunity to deliver his Lord into the hands of his enemies. Bacon notes that a man who studies revenge keeps his own wounds green, while Robert Burns pictures our sulky Solange, gathering her brows like gathering storm, nursing her wrath to keep it warm. Ahab, as a willing tool of the evil one, allowed the spirit of covetousness, along with many other wicked traits, to be at home in his daily living. And it was for this reason that he could not accept no from anyone whose possessions he wanted. He was simply not interested in the rights and wishes of others, but sought first and foremost to have his own desires satisfied. In summing up some of the more noticeable characteristics of Ahab, the greater men and women of the Bible points out that in spite of his courage and his genius, which made him a great king, Ahab was preeminently a weak man. Indeed, the most prominent influence throughout his whole life is the working of a self-deceiving conscience. His sin is ever as a serpent that hides its head. It has some cloak or shelter rather than being of that open and bold character which defies God. Heavy and displeased, he broods over sinful wishes and is glad to reap fruits of that wickedness which he did not dare by himself to commit. Again, that brings us up to our text. And again, we're going to be looking at 1 Kings chapter 21, verses 1 through 7, and then verses 16 through 20. This takes place around 899 BC in Jezreel, and the characters that we're going to be looking at in the text are Naboth, Ahab, Jezebel, and Elijah. I am reading from the American Standard Version. And now to our text. 1 Kings chapter 21, verses 1 through 7, and verses 16 through 20. Again, I am reading from the American Standard Version. And it came to pass, after these things, that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard, which was in Jezreel, hard by the place of Ahab, king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it, or if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. And Naboth said to Ahab, Jehovah forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased, because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed, and turned away his face, and would eat no bread. But Jezebel, his wife, came to him, and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad, that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel his wife said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thy heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Now we come to verses 16 through 20. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab rose up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. And the word of Jehovah came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise, go down to meet Ahab king of Israel, who dwelleth in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, whether he is gone down to take possession of it. And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith Jehovah, Hast thou killed, and also taken possession? And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith Jehovah, In the place where dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine. And Ahab said to Elijah, Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? And he answered, I have found thee, because thou hast sold thyself to do that which is evil in the sight of Jehovah. I would say the golden text here is Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Verse 15. Luke chapter 12, verse 15. Take heed and keep yourselves from all covetousness. One of the great sins of our age, and apparently of all ages, as for that matter, is the sin of covetousness. The basic meaning of covetousness is the unlawful or inordinate desire for that which belongs to another. The 10th commandment of the Decalogue, which was based on the fundamental and eternal principles of contentment and unselfishness, reads as follows: Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. That's from the 10 Commandments found in Exodus chapter 20, and that is verse 17. So grave is the sin of covetousness that Paul calls it idolatry. Put to death, therefore, your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. That's Colossians chapter 3, verse 5. One of the clearest as well as one of the most practical definitions of covetousness may be learned from the language of Jesus himself as set forth in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. When one withholds for himself that which is rightfully belongs to another, or that which should be used on or in behalf of another, the one doing so becomes guilty of covetousness. The psalmist says, For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and the covetous renounceth, yea, contemneth Jehovah. That's Psalm chapter 10, verse 3. The passage just quoted is an example of Hebrew parallelism, a style of sentence structure in which the first part states a proposition, after which is repeated in slightly different words in the second part. If one will take this fact into consideration, it will not be difficult for him to see that some rather strong language is applied to the sin of covetousness. It is the wicked who boast of his heart's desire, while the covetous is in apposition with the wicked, or which is the same thing. The covetous is put alongside the wicked, as it were, to explain and tell who the wicked one is. Renounce and despise God, or which is the same thing, the covetous abhor God, which is a profound rejection of him. People who are not familiar with the nature and true meaning of covetousness may not consider it such a serious fault, but if they will take into account that which the Bible teaches regarding the question, they will soon see that there is no other sin in the Old Testament to which the stigma employed by the psalmist is attached. There is no possible way for a covetous person to be pleasing to God, and neither is there a greater mark of infamy used to characterize any other sin. Even a blasphemer who denounces God in his rash moments would not employ such terms against him in his sober moments. but for one to denounce and revile God, as the Bible says the covetous does, is to be guilty of the very acme of antagonism, or which is the same thing, to have a mind which is the very opposite the mind of God. Is it any wonder, therefore, that Jesus says, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." That's Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. Let's take a look at verses 1 through 4 of 1 Kings chapter 21. This is Ahab's request and Naboth's refusal. And it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the place of Ahab king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, "Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money." And Naboth said to Ahab, "Jehovah forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee." And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased, because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he had said, "I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers." And he laid him down upon his bed, and turned away his face, and would eat no bread. These things apparently refer to the events of the preceding chapter, although chapters 20 and 21 are transposed in the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, and in Josephus' account of the events of those days. That, however, is a question for the textual critics, and we shall simply regard the narrative now before us as being accurately set forth in our version of the Scriptures. The Jezreel mentioned in the text we are now considering was a city or town in which Ahab maintained a residence, probably a summer home, and which may have been the ivory palaces which he built. The principal capital of Ahab's kingdom was in Samaria. The vineyard which belonged to Naboth, the one we are now considering, was hard by the palace of Ahab, and the king wanted it for a herb garden. The proposition which Ahab presented to Naboth regarding the latter's vineyard appears on the surface to be fair and legitimate in every way, but we should always remember that things which are recorded in the Bible are not necessarily what they seem. People should be careful about drawing conclusions regarding the teachings of the Scriptures before they consider all the Bible says on the subject under consideration. The vineyard which belonged to Naboth was not his to do as he pleased with. It was the hereditary property of his family, that is, those who were then living and who would come in the future, so long as the law of Moses remained in force. This had been the way matters stood since the land was divided and the law governing it had been given. Later on, the prophet Ezekiel would say, "Moreover, the prince shall not take of the people's inheritance to thrust them out of their possession, that my people be not scattered, every man from his possession." That's Ezekiel chapter 46, verse 18. And also see that in Micah chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Thus, when Naboth said, "Jehovah forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee," he was but showing that he feared God and that it was his duty to obey God rather than man. While we have no direct information on the subject, it is quite possible that Naboth was one of the 7,000 who had not bowed the knee to Baal. And while the record which we do have gives us some insight into the character of Naboth, the reaction of the king to his neighbor's refusal to give up the inheritance of his fathers enables us to form a fairly clear idea as to the kind of man Ahab was. He reminds one of a spoiled child who, having been used to having his way in everything and not knowing the meaning of refusal, lies down on the floor and refuses to eat or even to look at anyone until he gets his way. There is, however, this difference between the spoiled child and Ahab. The king apparently did not expect to get the vineyard of Naboth, but this was not the first time that this king had gone to his house heavy and displeased. We can see that in 1 Kings chapter 20, verses 35 through 43. Ahab was basically a covetous man, and that trait had a profound effect on his overall character. We have already seen in this study that a covetous man is totally unlike God, and inasmuch as that is true, we should make every effort to see to it that every trace of the malady is removed from our lives. It appears that many people do not take seriously anything which may affect their welfare until they are brought face to face with its deadly effects. Let us consider again this issue. Why is covetousness so deadly when it is permitted to influence the thinking and lives of people? It has already been pointed out that covetousness is the exact opposite of the spirit and nature of God. It is more extreme than atheism. Atheism only fails to see a divine being. Covetousness sees us quite well, but does not admire his beauty, but instead longs for the exact opposite. God is love, and the essence of love is giving. Covetousness is essentially selfish, and the essence of selfishness is retaining. God is the converse of avarice. He dispenses his bounty to the needy, while avarice gathers gold for itself. God lavishes his treasures, while avarice hoards its gain. God does not live to himself, but avarice has no life for another. God seeks out the destitute, while avarice conceals himself so that he will not meet the poor. God has many mansions for his people, but avarice covets and has but a single room, only enough for itself. God scatters sunbeams, while avarice picks up pins. God sheds his blood to give life for the needy, while avarice sheds the blood of the needy to give life to itself. Is there any wonder, therefore, that the psalmist selected as the reverse of godliness avarice rather than atheism? Psalm 119, verse 36 says, "Incline my heart unto thy testimonies, and not to covetousness." Those who know something about the nature of the sin we are now dealing with can well understand why Jesus says, "Take heed, and keep yourselves from all covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth." That's Luke chapter 12, verse 15. Now let's look at verses 5 through 7. This is Jezebel to the rescue. But Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said unto him, "Why is thy spirit so sad that thou eatest no bread?" And he said unto her, "Because I spake with Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel's wife said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thy heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." The high-handed method by which Jezebel made good on her promise to give Naboth's vineyard to Ahab is set forth in the inspired record. Beginning with verse 8, we read, "So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, and sealed them with the seal, and sent the letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in a city, and that dwelt with Naboth. And she wrote in the letters, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men, base fellows, before him, and let them bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst curse God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him to death." See that in 1 Kings chapter 21, verses 8 through 10. The manner in which Jezebel ordered her plans to be carried out plainly shows that she understood the law of Moses regarding such matters. After notifying the leaders of the king's city, she ordered a fast to be proclaimed, as would be done in the case of grave national emergency caused by a crime which involved all the people in danger of being punished by God, or when they especially felt the need of his help. The fast thus proclaimed and observed would prepare the way to deity. The alleged culprit was then to be brought to trial, and at least 2 witnesses had to testify to his guilt. The punishment for the sin of blasphemy was stoning. The subservient leaders to whom Jezebel letters were sent, apparently made no delay in carrying out her demands, as may be seen by reading 1 Kings chapter 21 verses 11 through 15. It is fair to assume from that which is said in the closing paragraph of the chapter from which today's lessons text is taken, that Ahab's conscience was not entirely gone. The sacred historian says, "And it came to pass, when Ahab heard those words, that he rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his flesh, and fasted, and lay in sackcloth, and went softly. And the word of Jehovah came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Seest thou how Ahab humbleth himself before me? Because he humbleth himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days will I bring the evil upon his house." God does not want anyone to be lost, and he is always willing to show mercy and give the sinner a further opportunity to turn to him, if and when the rebellious one shows any signs of penitence. But when we look at Jezebel, it is not possible for us to see any sign of conscientiousness whatsoever. She apparently was completely without fear of either God or man, and she did not hesitate to do anything, regardless of what effect it might have on others, if only her own desire could be realized. It was pointed out in an earlier study that Jezebel was a heathen princess, the daughter of Ethbaal, the king of the Sidonians. After stating that Ahab did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah above all that were before him, the inspired historian added this comment, "And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Naboth, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him." Jezebel, as Hastings points out, has been the type of female wickedness throughout the ages, but she is especially the type of wickedness which irrevocably ruins the morally weak, while they are hesitating on the brink of sin, gives the fatal impulse which hurls them into the abyss. This imperious princess had come from a land where royalty was all-powerful and possessed no restraints of conscience. Her character was strong, firm, and unmalleable, a heart of flint, cold, passionless, cruel, and as sharp as a dagger's edge. There was apparently no lapse of time between Ahab's informing her of Naboth's refusal to give the king his vineyard and Jezebel's announced plan for dealing with the situation. The contrast between Jezebel and her husband was similar to that which existed between Lady Macbeth and her husband, where the feebler resolution of the man was urged to crime by the bolder and more relentless spirit of the woman. And that brings us up to verses 16 through 20. The divine human encounter. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab rose up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, to take possession of it. Although attention has already been called to the execution of Jezebel's orders to have Naboth removed from the scene, it will be helpful to read the text itself. And the men of his city, even the elders and the nobles who dwelt in his city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them, according as it was written in the letters which she had sent unto them. They proclaimed a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and the two men, the base fellows, came in and sat before him. And the base fellows bare witness against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did curse God and the king. Then they carried him forth out of the city, and stoned him to death with stones. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. That Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money, but Naboth is alive, but not dead. Let me read that verse again. Okay, I lost my place. Let's back up a little bit. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. And it came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money, for Naboth is not alive, but dead. Matthew Henry points out that never were more wicked orders given by any prince than those which Jezebel issued, and never were they more likely and slavishly obeyed by the agents who carried them out. There is not the slightest indication that they so much as questioned a single thing the queen said, to say nothing of offering any remonstrance. Those weaklings promptly obeyed their orders, and just as promptly notified Jezebel that her wishes had been carried out to the letter. And from all indications, it appears that Jezebel received the news of Naboth's death with undisguised satisfaction. It was no concern of hers that Jehovah's name had been profaned, that religion had been dishonored, that justice had been outraged, or that innocent blood had been shed. Jezebel had obtained her object, and she so notified her husband. It seems fair to assume from 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 26, that the sons of Naboth were also slain. Taylor notes that one might have thought that Ahab would have expressed some disapproval of the awful conspiracy which ended in such a tragic horror, but no. Like many in modern times, though his conscience would not allow him to commit the foul deed himself, yet he did not scruple to avail himself of the results of such a crime. When it was planned and carried out by someone else, he probably felt that although he had no direct part in Naboth's death, he might as well be benefited by it, and so he immediately prepared to go and take possession of it. And the word of Jehovah came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise, go down to me Ahab, king of Israel, who dwelleth in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, which he is gone down to take possession of it. And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith Jehovah, Hast thou killed and also taken possession? And thou shalt speak unto him, saying, Thus saith Jehovah, In the place where dogs lick the blood of Naboth shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine. And Ahab said to Elijah, Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? And he answered, I have found thee, because thou hast sold thyself to do that which is evil in the sight of Jehovah. It is both interesting and profitable to observe that the murder of Naboth by Ahab and Jezebel did more to undermine the throne of those two wicked people than even the worship of Baal. The very names of Ahab and Jezebel suggest the very acme of sin. The name and character of Jezebel were used by Jesus to express his supreme opposition to certain practices in the church in Thyatira, as may be seen by reading Revelation chapter 2, verses 20 through 23. The manner in which this wicked woman died should be a constant reminder that the wages of sin is death. The terrible curse which was pronounced upon Ahab and Jezebel by God is found in 1 Kings chapter 21, verses 21 through 26. Keep our nation in your prayers. Keep our nation's leaders in your prayers. Keep the persecuted church in your prayers. Stay safe, be blessed, and stay in the Word. And we're going to close with some music here in a moment.